Hello everyone, welcoming once again to this session of your English class today. Good human values are far above any other value. Humanity is beyond any borders or any prejudice, whereas patriotism is loyalty towards one's country. Both the values are essential for human beings. Sometimes an individual finds himself face to face with such situations where one has to choose between one's ethics and patriotism. There are people whose personal life and regulations take a back seat when they require to stand by human goodness. The borders that we see around us are all man-made. These borders turn sometimes the countries into enemies against one another. However, humanity knows no boundary. Humanity knows no borders. Today I want to take up the story, The Enemy, which is based on the foundations of selflessness, sense of duty, compassion and generosity. Numerous films and novels are based on these themes. This tale reminds me of the story which you have already read in class 11, Birth by A.J. Cronin, where a doctor named Andrew saved the life of a almost stillborn baby with a lot of effort. Now let's know the story The Enemy, which also revolves around a doctor who had done his hardest to save a nearly dead human being to save his life. So the story The Enemy by Pearl S. Buck. The Enemy by Pearl S. Buck. Before we know this thought-provoking story, let's know a little about the writer Pearl S. Buck, who was an American writer and novelist. She was the first American woman to win the Nobel Prize for Literature for her rich and truly epic descriptions of peasants in China, for her novel The Good Earth, and for her biological masterpieces. The thought-provoking story, The Enemy, deals with the conflict between man's human feelings and the prejudices created by nations at war. It deals with the universal human values which must take precedence over narrow considerations like nationalism. Secondly, the story deals with the conflict between a man's duty towards the nation and towards his own conscience. In fact, the story raises questions about the ethics of a human being at a time of war. The story also underlines that doctors have no nationality. They must rise above all petty issues like racism in the best service to the humanity. The story is set at the time of the Second World War. It is a heart-rending portrayal of the conflict between man's head and heart. As the story begins, we learn that Dr. Sadao had been sent to America by his father to get the best education in surgery and medicine. His father was a traditional Japanese man, and before he had died, Sadao had become a successful surgeon and a well-known scientist. While studying in America, Sadao, along with other foreign students, was invited to his professor's house. There he met his future wife Hannah, but waited until he found out whether she was of pure Japanese race, before he fell in love with her. After Hannah met Sadao's father, they got married in the old Japanese way. It was the time of the Second World War when Japan and America were fighting on opposite sides. Dr. Sadao and Hannah were standing on the balcony of their house on the beach when they saw a black figure rise out of water and then fall with his face down into the sand. The couple rushed towards the man. On reaching the man, Dr. Sadao saw that the man was bleeding profusely and with the help of his wife turned the man over. Both of them were surprised on seeing that he was a young American sailor. The man was thin and looked as if he had been tortured badly. Dr. Sadao realized that the man was bleeding from an old gunshot wound on the right side of his lower back where the flesh had blackened. The rocks had also reopened the wound. They took him into their home while at the same time they were both troubled by the questions of whether the American prisoner should be saved or not, whether he should be treated or not. However, a sense of duty and a strong belief in that duty made Dr. Sadao decide to operate. In the meantime, the servants were unhappy. They were superstitious and believed that as the sea was trying to kill the man, it was wrong that the master wanted to save him. They were afraid that the sea would take revenge. Hannah asked the maid, and the name of the maid is Yumi. So she asked the maid, Yumi, to fetch hot water and clean the man who was now in Sadao's father's room. Yumi stubbornly refused to wash a white man. Hannah's pride did not permit her from forcing the maid, so she washed him herself. Sadao came in wearing his surgeon's coat and brought his surgeon's bag ready to operate. He asked Hannah to fetch some towels and told her that she would have to apply the anesthetic if it was required. When Sadao began, Hannah turned pale and ran out to retch. Actually, she felt like vomiting. Sadao did not like to see his wife in distress, but knew it was better that she had emptied her stomach. When she returned, he taught her how to saturate the cotton and hold it near the patient's nostrils. If he began to breathe badly, she had to move it away. Although he was operating on a person considered to be the enemy. Sadao called him my friend, as he normally did with his other patients. While he was unconscious, Hannah noticed that the young man was extremely thin and looked as if he had gone through much sufferings and tortures. Although the newspapers were filled with news of how happily the Japanese army was received everywhere, Hannah had heard rumors of the General Takema who beat his wife. She also noticed deep red scars on the American's neck, just under his ears. After the operation, Dr. Sadao declared that the man would live after all. As the servants refused to enter the room, Hannah looked after the man and even fed him herself. The servants were not happy with this, and they felt that the couple had forgotten that they were not Americans but Japanese. Sadao was afraid that they might report the matter to the authorities and then he and Hannah would be arrested. When the American was on the road to recovery and the last stitches had been pulled out, Dr. Sadao typed a letter to the chief of police reporting the entire matter. However, he did not send the letter but put the unfinished report in a secret drawer in his desk. On the seventh day, two things happened. When Dr. Sadao and Hannah got up, no work had been done. The food had not been cooked and the house had not been cleaned. The servants appeared in the kitchen where Hannah paid them before they left. Dr. Sadao checked on his patient and told him to get up for 5 minutes and then to increase the time every day until he got his strength back. Secondly, in the afternoon, a messenger arrived saying that the general had asked for Dr. Sadao. Hannah was frightened, as she thought the servants had reported the matter and they would be arrested. But after asking the messenger, they were told that the general was in pain and needed Sadao to attend to him. On seeing Hannah's terror, Sadao was determined to get rid of the American as soon as possible. Dr. Sadao went to see the general and told him about the prisoner he was sheltering in his home. But the general did not want Sadao to be arrested or harmed in any way in case he needed a surgery. He offered to send his own private assistants to get rid of the prisoner quietly and without any bloodshed. He told Sadao that they would even get rid of the body for him. Sadao felt relieved and agreed. But the general, because of his suffering, forgot about the promise he had made to Dr. Sadao. Sadao spent 3 sleepless nights waiting for the assassins who never came. Finally, he took matters into his own hands and decided to help the prisoner escape. He examined the sailor and told him that he was well enough to leave in Sadao's boat that very night. Sadao had tied the boat to a post as the tide was high. He had put food, water, and quilts, which he had got from a pawn shop, into the boat. He gave Tom, the American sailor, his own flashlight, some Japanese clothes to wear, and black cloth to tie around his blonde head so that it could not be seen. He told him of a nearby island which was uninhabited as it submerges during the storm season. He told him to stay there until a Korean fishing boat passed by and took him to safety. He gave him further instructions to never light a fire and not cook anything. He also told him to signal 2 flashes at the same time, the sun set over the horizon, and to signal him once if he was all right, but still on the island. He also cautioned him against signaling in the dark as it could be easily seen. After the prisoner left, the servants returned. When Sadao was called to attend to the general again, he told him that the prisoner had escaped. The general then remembered about the American and explained that it was not because he was unpatriotic or because of his dereliction of duty, but it was because he had been suffering that he forgot. Now, Sadao knew that he was not in any danger, as he now had the general in the palm of his hand. The general then promised to reward Sadao. However, Sadao was truly rewarded when there was no prick of light from the island that evening and he was able to finally relax. It meant that the American had been able to escape, suddenly Sadao remembered all the Americans he knew, his professors, at whose house he had met Hannah, his anatomy teacher, and his fat and slatternly landlady. He remembered how much racism he had to face while he was there in America, and the hatred he had felt for the Americans. He also felt that it was strange that he could not kill the American prisoner. Thus, we can see the story shows how humanity triumphs over hatred and narrow national prejudices. Thank you very much. Hope you must have understood the story in detail. In case of any doubt, you can ask me in the comment section.